Hey everyone, welcome to Josette's Soul Salon, where we have weekly conversations that answer the question, what does it take to live a soul-expressed life? I'm your host, Josette Leblanc, and during this episode, I speak with Rachel Capurso of Aeolian Heart Astrology about the history and power of astrology. Astrology is currently enjoying a massive boom in interest, but remains a somewhat divisive topic in mainstream thinking, despite its historical role in the origins of science. To understand more deeply what astrology is and how it can help us live a soul-expressed life, I invited Rachel to come on the podcast and tease apart what astrology is and what it isn't. Rachel is an astrologer, teacher, and the founder of Aeolian Heart Astrology. She's a voice that speaks to free spirits and free minds. She illuminates the timeless wisdom of Hermetic philosophy with a unique blend of pop culture, history, and art. She believes that astrology is magic because following the rhythm of the planets reveals that life is a graceful dance, not a long march. Her natal chart readings awaken the soul, reigniting one's passion, purpose, and flow. In this conversation, we explore the origins of astrology, how astrology works, how astrology makes predictions, the relationship between astrology and Christianity, the ethics of astrology, and the power of getting to know your natal chart. You'll want to listen to the end to hear Rachel explain the type of radical shifts that become possible when you understand your personal natal chart. To connect with Rachel, check the links in the show notes. And if you enjoy what you hear, make sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review. Now let's get into the salon. All right. Hello, everyone. I am so excited. I am here with Rachel Capurso. Am I saying that correctly?
Capurso
of Aeolian Heart. Thank you for clarifying that. I meant to ask you before we started.
Okay.
So I'm so excited to be with Rachel today because she is my astrology teacher, and we have so many exciting things to talk about today. We're going to focus, of course, on astrology, and we're also going to mix it up with magic. And this is something I was eager to talk about in general, but more specifically excited to talk about with Rachel because I learned so much about this through you. So thank you so much for being here, Rachel.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah. So let's just dive in. One thing that I learned through you, through the course Discovery, which I know you are releasing soon. If this podcast is being recorded right now, April 6th, I think, if I remember my calendar. What I learned from you was astrology and the art of astrology, and also how that intertwines with magic. But and I know that a lot of people listening, or perhaps some people listening, I'm not really clear on what is magic. You know, we have the idea, like yesterday, my son was talking about, let's make magic. Let's make a rabbit pop out of a hat, where there's that magic. But then there's also this magic that we talk about that is defining the unseen and helping us understand how things, happen seemingly out of the blue. So let's get started on that topic. How would you describe magic in the sense that we're talking today? And how does it connect to astrology?
Okay, that's a huge question. So let me just start I love to talk about words, root words, to understand something like the word magic. It sounds like so mysterious, and it's difficult to discern where the fork in the road was between, like you said, rabbit and hat tricks, and the sort of like supernatural spiritual practice of magic that we know from mostly like fantasy novels and such. But magic is very real. And what the common root word in magic is mag, M-A-G. And we also find that word mag, M-A-G, in the word image, as well as imagination. So imagination and image, imagination produces images within. We don't actually think in words, we think in images, and we use our words to translate the images that are flowing through us, which is pretty amazing to think about, how much complexity there is going on within us at all times, because no, we're not seeing words ticking across the screen of our mind. We are feeling and seeing images. We dream at night in what? Images, imagery. So our imagination is not just the place of fantasy. It's not just the place where we escape from reality. Our imagination is actually the nature of our consciousness. It's the nature of our inner world, and it speaks in images. And we have a tremendous amount of control over the images that we hold, that we choose to hold. Not necessarily the images that flow through us, but the images that we choose to carry, the images we use to cultivate. We hear this term a lot when we talk about our self-image. So this is like commonplace, absolutely pop psychology stuff, self-image. When your self-image is good, it's well understood that your life begins to flow in a far more positive way because the image you hold of yourself is positive. It's forgiving. It's accepting. If you have a negative self-image, that produces what? Negative self-talk and negative experiences because you think of yourself poorly. You imagine yourself to be what? A failure, a loser, incompetent, whatever it is. So just taking that simple premise of acknowledging that each one of us is this vessel of images, and imagination is that space within us. It's the inner world that produces these images. Magic is the art of changing those images within so that you can create changes in your inner world, which then become naturally reflected in the outer world, which seems quite strange and esoteric to a dogmatic materialist, because in the sort of scientific, technocratic, materialist paradigm that most of us have been conditioned by, we were taught that there is no correlation between our external reality, our perceptions, and what is going on inside of us, psychologically, emotionally, imaginatively. But there really truly is, and that is what psychology is trying to work on. If you go to see a psychologist, what they're trying to help you with is to develop the images that you're holding in a far more positive way, in a healthy way.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's super. So as I just listened to that definition, because I've heard you say that before, but it just clicked again. So what you're describing here, in, as you said, pop psychology or the self-help world, maybe if we want to say right now, maybe the way that it's starting to, this concept of magic is starting to seep into our collective consciousness is with the concept of, oh my gosh, what is it called? Manifestation, but the law of attraction, right?
Right.
This is the whole idea, is what's in your mind, you will manifest, right?
That's
and so
right.
Magic is another term for that.
Exactly. And
Okay.
magic comes from a time before there was a split between spirit and matter, before there was a split between the material world and the spiritual world, right? So we live in this very strange time where those two aspects of consciousness, the inner world and the outer world, have actually been separated or like divorced. But what magic actually is it's a holistic sense of the world, which includes your external observations and experiences as a reflection of or correlated to your inner experience, your inner world, and vice versa. Your inner world is considered to be a reflection of what is going on outside. So we have plenty of remnants of this in the fact that people still understand that their dreams represent some kind of message a lot of the time. And you could go to, a therapist and tell them, I had this nightmare, or I have this recurring nightmare. And your therapist will try to help you work out what the message of that recurring nightmare is, because that recurring nightmare is a sign that there's something going on inside that needs worked on. And very likely it's manifesting in some kind of block or some kind of challenge in the external world. And that is why therapy always starts by working on the inner world. So magic is just the acknowledgement that we have the power to change our internal world, to relate to our internal world more intelligently, and to explore that inner space with a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and adventurous spirit and an artistic quality as well, because magic presents the notion that you are at least partly, this is where the term co-creation comes from, that you are partly the author of your own destiny. Now, that doesn't mean that every single thing in life you have control over. There are forces of nature that are beyond the individual, of course, but we certainly have a lot of sovereignty here. We have a lot of choice about how we choose to perceive ourselves and perceive the potential that we have. And so basically, magic is just choosing, even though the external world may not yet reveal what it is that you desire to experience. Magic is taking a moment to go within and imagining the outcome that you wish to experience, imagining yourself meeting with the destiny that you have already desired, already formulated, already chosen to bring into your life. So a really, really simple expression of magic that we still do, and everybody does it almost, is a birthday cake with candles.
Okay.
The whole idea of blowing out birthday candles is classic magic because it's, number one, symbolic. The cake is meant to celebrate another year lived by whatever wonderful person it is that you're celebrating. You know, you've made it another year, yay! And you were born on this day, which is very important because that's the day of your solar return in astrology, meaning the sun has returned to the place that it was when you were born. So it's a solar return, your birthday. It's cause for celebration because we're celebrating life. And when you actually, the cake represents the abundance and the joy and the celebration of that moment. And the candles, they're quite symbolic of the sun itself because they are a flame. And what do you do in that moment? You are meant to hold a wish. So you take a second to imagine something that you want. So let's say it's my birthday and the candles are in front of me and everybody's all excited. They sing. Everybody sings to raise the energy and create that energy of celebration. And then the birthday girl or the birthday boy actually takes a moment to hold an image of something they want. So let's say for my birthday, I want to go to my favorite hot springs resort. That's what I really want. That's my wish. I hold that image for 1 second. I feel it and I'm all excited. I feel very, very positive, very optimistic. And in that good state of emotional heights, I actually feel into that joy, that desire. I see it happening just for a second. And then I blow out the candle, which is the ritual representation of my wish fulfilled, like that. And you're not supposed to tell what your wish was. You're not supposed to tell. You're supposed to keep it inside. And that's another element of magic. So it's like, oh no, that's not born yet. That's still inside of me. That's my own private wish. That's my own joy that I'm protecting from other people's ideas, other people's judgments, other people's energy. So the whole idea of a birthday wish is magic. That is magic. And that's why it doesn't have to be so esoteric and so strange and so scary. Another thing that is magic, whether some people want to acknowledge it as such or not, is prayer. Mm-hmm. Prayer is magic because if you're praying properly for somebody who's sick, for example, the last thing you want to do is fold your hands, go within, and connect to a higher power while imagining that person being sick and in pain. You don't want to do that. You want to instead, you see the person sick and in pain and you go, this is not what I want to see. What I want is for this person to be healed. What I want is to help this person heal by adding my energy to that, even by calling on a higher power in order to help that person heal. And so you do that. You take a moment to be an intercessor, to petition on behalf of this person. And in that prayer, what you're meant to do is, first of all, let go of all fear, because the whole idea of trusting, having faith, is that you're no longer projecting fear and worry and strain onto that person. Instead, you're letting go of all of that. You're getting centered, going within, and you imagine that person being healed. Mm-hmm. When you say the words, dear God, please heal this person, you are actually imagining that it is already done. And that's you holding an image of somebody's healing. If you pray and you're imagining, if you say like, dear God, please heal them, but the whole time you're just seeing them like getting worse and worse and worse, you're actually making it worse. And that's why the study of magic is so helpful, because it is psychology before psychology. It is a process of sifting, sorting, and refining the inner world, not only to improve the conditions of your life through self-knowledge and also by experimentation, taking note of what actually happens, what ripples actually start from within and begin to make positive changes or even interesting changes in your external world as a result of doing magic, whether that is lighting a candle, meditating, blowing it out, whether that is creating a ritual space, burning smoke, writing a petition, or saying a prayer. These are all the same thing, even though they have different processes, different styles. They're different styles of the same thing, which is acknowledging that there is a reflexive relationship between our inner world and our outer world. And we are creative. We do have creative power. We do have the power to change the shape of our reality. And it's not just by means of physically altering material substances. Although, even if you're just talking about that, if you want to build something,
right,
it begins with imagination. Even that, which is, it seems extremely practical and very material, still, the conception of a building, the blueprints that must be created, the inspiration of how it's going to look and how it's going to serve people and how the energy is going to flow, all of those things still begin in the imagination. It starts as an image that then gets translated into a map, and that map gets translated into the actual manifestation, and everything works that way. Yeah. So that's what magic is.
That's so exciting, because when I hear you talk, what I hear is that we're just using different types of language, different types. We're all from, when I used to think of the word imagination, I used to think of, just fantasy world and these things of, and you also think of children. Oh, they have a vivid imagination, as if it's not something that is real or that it doesn't have validity. And right. It is valid, as you described it. We manifest whatever we want based on what we have in our mind.
That's right.
And also what I love about what you're saying is, especially when you were talking about prayer, is, the power of energy, that it's energy. We're talking about working with energy healing, energy direction,
That's right.
And it's not something that we can see. And I guess that's the big mystery of it too, of the concept of magic, is that because we can't see it, we're not sure if it's actually happening. And this not being sure, not having a tangible, immediate example gives us a challenge. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't work or that it's not happening, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Everything has an effect, and sometimes it's more subtle, what we would call subtle, when you're an empiricist. Yes. And when you're conditioned to be an empiricist, it's very easy to disregard so much of life's experiences. But the reality of it is, you can have, let's say, a beautiful essential oil of a rose, and that's very physical and it's very material and it's quite real by all empirical standards. And then you take that and you inhale it. And yes, it stimulates a lot of chemicals that we associate with pleasure, endorphins and such, I'm sure. And it has other, physical chemical reactions that the scent of the rose actually causes. Yeah. But it's more than that. The scent of a rose can carry you deep, deep, deep into a memory so vivid that you feel like you're living something again. The scent of a rose can inspire suddenly like a strain of music to emerge from your imagination. Suddenly you're inspired to write something. The scent of a rose can make you feel romantic all of a sudden, changes your consciousness. It's so much more than just the brain chemicals, because it's the brain chemicals that are enacting upon this fertile ground of human creativity. And the possibilities are infinite. And that's what's so exciting about acknowledging what's going on internally in every situation. You know, like in the Enlightenment, when spirit and matter were divorced, when they split, that's when, you know, music was no longer sacred in its intention. And music always had been sacred in its intention, but music was now just something that was just there for sound. And alchemy became chemistry. So in the world we live in today, like chemistry has all of the cred. Chemistry is science and it's real and it has provable, justifiable results that you can measure and quantify. But the difference between chemistry and alchemy was that alchemists cared a lot about the internal experience of their experiments. So they were no less scientific. They were still studying nature. They were still taking things out of nature and bringing them into labs to break them apart, to study their components, to change their form, to isolate chemicals, to do all of the things that chemists do. They were doing that as well. But what alchemists were also recording in their laboratories were the internal changes that were happening as a result of their experiments. And the internal shifts in consciousness that were a part of their experiments were recorded through these symbolic, kind of mythopoeic, lucid dreams. So yes, the memories that can be evoked, the transportation to another realm from a certain relationship to a plant or a relationship to a substance or a color or a process in the lab, these things really, really mattered to the alchemists as well. So they were studying the internal experience as well. They were also poets and also philosophers. They were not thinking about poetry being separated from other arts and sciences. Like they just had all of that together as one. It was a holistic understanding of nature, internal and external, internal perceptions and the way they affect external perceptions and vice versa. So this leads us to the basic premise of astrology, which again, if alchemy is to chemistry after the Enlightenment, the split between spirit and matter, astrology is the oldest body of knowledge on the planet. And it's actually the mother of all sciences. And I have received a tremendous amount of virulent hate mail recently for having called astrology a science, which I think is really funny. But it makes sense because people are so conditioned at this point to believe that science is exclusively a materialist paradigm. It's exclusively an empirical method of knowing. And it's something that is pretty ahistorical because that point of view is only 300-400 years old. That point of view is so new. It's in its infancy, and it's really a rather failed experiment. It's not really working for humanity because we're more than just what we can touch, see, and feel. That's important, but it tells us so much more than just what can be quantified. So astrology is astronomy from the ancient world, which is, it's absolutely awe-inducing. It's awesome to actually look back at ancient civilizations and see how they used astrology to inform not only the way that they grew their plants and their crops, but actually how they built their cities. All ancient cities were great monuments to the heavens, and that's a fact. They actually derived the art forms and the sciences of things like geometry from the stars, from studying the stars. We didn't just come up with geometry out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Just like you don't imagine building something out of nowhere. There's some kind of need. So the need to invent geometry was actually born from the desire to understand the motions of the heavens more. And when you look up at the stars, if you can, I can't really see the stars that well in LA, but you look and you're like, wow, look at all these points of light. And imagine having centuries after century upon century in the stillness of the night with no electrical lights, all of these people recording and observing. They're looking at not only the movements, but the points of light start to connect, and the human imagination begins to create mathematics so that we can actually study and measure and understand the movements of the heavens, and therefore create things like architecture. Great architecture comes from geometry. Geometry comes from the stars. So when I say astrology is the mother of all sciences, I mean it very literally. It's not just a poetic device. Not only that, but astrology, rather than just studying the motions of the planets for the purpose of having a mathematical understanding of how far everything is from the sun and how swiftly everything's moving, and when we predict that the sun will burn out, instead of simply using mathematics to quantify everything, what astrologers were interested in was also how do the motions or the change of light, how does this shifting light affect life on Earth internally as well?
Mm-hmm.
And so when people go, that makes no sense, I go, okay, well, how different do you feel inside in the morning versus at night?
It's pretty simple. I mean, this is what, and this is the exciting part, is that it's all exciting, but when you start to pay attention to your natural rhythms, really pay attention to your natural rhythms, monthly, weekly, daily, you become aware of like how much the earth and the stars and the cosmos does affect you. You know, you can tell by the light of the moon how you are feeling. I challenge anyone listening to pay attention to how you feel around a new moon compared to how you feel around a full moon. We have all heard about what happens at the full moon. Oh, there must be a full moon tonight. Everybody's going crazy. You know, that's from something. It comes from something. I know personally that around a new moon, I just don't even talk. I mean, don't talk to me. I'm not, but that comes from having paid attention to my energy. And I think of people way back when, like what you described, when astrology, you know, when people were studying the stars, and they were so in tune with nature. They had nothing to clutter their minds. You know, all they had was the stars, literally, the people around them, the earth, and their imagination. They were tapped into things we can't even, you know, we're cluttered with tech. We're cluttered with so much right now, you know? Yeah. And then the division, as you described, that division that happened during the Enlightenment. I mean, that's the beginning of it. Oh my gosh. So, so beautiful. Yeah.
It's the beginning. And, you know, I don't even want to be condemning of the Enlightenment, because I see, you know, what astrology actually studies is large cycles of time and the evolution of consciousness through these large cycles of time, as well as small cycles of time that affect our personal individual lives right now. But astrology is so vast and it's so ancient. We can look at all these sweeping ebbs and flows in the development of consciousness, human consciousness as a part of nature, just one element of it, right? Human consciousness is a part of nature. We're not outside of it. We are nature. So the Enlightenment is an interesting time because it represented exactly what I said, a separation. Going back to alchemy, alchemy was proto-chemistry, and that doesn't mean it was lesser. It actually was more than in so many ways, because of the fact that it related to more qualities of experience, more consciousness was involved in the alchemy, which is why alchemists didn't go so far. And there were like really dark alchemists that had ideas like scientists do today to do all kinds of unholy things. You know, they were not like all holy men, but you know, there was less less degradation of consciousness. There was more connection to nature, and therefore less imagination of how to like rape and pillage the earth, destroy people's bodies through chemicals, just they had less capacity to do all that damage because they were more integrated. However, in order for things to evolve in nature, there has to be moments of separation. Like each one of us began as a single cell that separated and then multiplied ad infinitum until we became the form that we are today. So that separation between spirit and matter I see as painful and difficult, and yet it was a necessary split that created this sort of proliferation of possibility. And eventually, that single cell that you and I once were in our mother's womb split, and it came back together at some point. So I think, just from a grander scale of consciousness evolution, that Enlightenment era was important because it split things and it created a new potential. And certainly like in the world of astrology, I have certainly studied what was going on with astrology at the time. And for the people of that era, like Voltaire is one of my favorite examples. Voltaire he hated astrology. And he mocked it constantly. He derided and mocked astrology constantly. And I've researched his point of view, and I actually agree with him from the perspective of where he was at in time, because by that point, astrologers had become they were institutional, number one.
Okay.
They were institutionalized. So they usually worked for the powerful people in the state. So they usually represented the state, just like scientists do today. And they usually were mouthpieces for the ruling class. And they had a serious problem at that point, having become so kind of bloated on their collective ego and so pampered by the powerful elites. The astrologers had taken to using their craft, using their knowledge to fearmonger and control people with a lot of, doomsday prophecies and a lot of things that we have seen today in our world in a slightly different context. Now it's scientists and journalists that do this. And so when I realized like Voltaire was rebelling against that, I'm like, that's badass that he threw astrology out. That's awesome. That was actually really good because it purified astrology. It actually it wrung all of that toxic, putrid waste out of it. And it went quiet for a while. It became a very underground, very quiet thing, only to find a reemergence again in the 19th century, and then another humongous reemergence in the late 20th, 21st century. So this is an astrological renaissance, the likes of which have not been seen since the Elizabethan era.
Okay.
Alexandria, there are these key points in history where astrology flowers again, it explodes and it becomes extremely important and influential again. And we're in one of those eras again now. But I'm grateful that it is not institutionalized. I'm grateful that astrology was taken out of that context that it had fallen into for several centuries when it was finally, cleansed during the Enlightenment. And maybe that's also true of the alchemy, but we're in this interesting stage right now where, yes, the separation happened, the single cell split, but nature is always creating and building, coalescing and concretizing and crystallizing. And so here we are in a very interesting time where spirit and matter is finding its way back to itself, because it's actually impossible to separate spirit and matter, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you condition people, no matter how dogmatic you become about there being nothing but what you can see or touch with the five senses, nothing more than that, nothing beyond this life. No matter how much you try to suppress that knowledge, it still just comes bursting out. We all know, we all feel it, we all dream, we all have experiences that are inexplicable, and we all have a deep sense of knowing that comes from more than what is quantifiable. And we're in that age now, the age of quantum physics, the age of, the new age, in all of its forms, some so very silly, but some really profound. We're in a philosophically interesting moment. And I feel like that means that spirit and matter never really did separate. And they have found new common ground. And there's this new syncretism, this new synthesis that's happening. And for the very dogmatic in any paradigm, the extremely dogmatic in any religion, the extremely dogmatic scientists, who are the real church of this era, by the way. I am tired of picking on religious people. They are not the problem. The true dogmatists of this age are the scientists that work for the state. Like, of course, just like in any era of history, you want to see who are the priest class that work for the king. In this age, those are the scientists. Hello, the ones that get paid billions of dollars to do their research, to get the results that the governments they work for are looking for. That's how it goes. They peddle their agenda using fear, again, like the old astrologers, using their special knowledge to inflict a sense of insecurity and a sense of dependency on the people they're supposed to be serving. This is human nature. It appears to be a pattern in history that repeats itself. The faces change. So in this age, we're sort of conditioned to continue to look for religious people to condemn for having this problem. And I'm like, why would you condemn them? They're not in power. It's not the religious people that are in power. The church is not the state anymore. The state is the state, and it is the scientific community that works for them. Does that mean I don't love science and don't appreciate science? Of course I do. But I don't appreciate people who work for the government and use their special knowledge and their power to disseminate fear and promote an agenda. It's very dishonest and it's extremely corrupt. So I don't appreciate that. I don't think anybody really does once they see it. And so, and yet they have the mantle of holiness in this age that we're living in. But we're also in such revolutionary times because things like astrology have been reborn like the phoenix. And this time, astrology is extremely potent because it immediately adjusts your consciousness. It immediately adjusts you back into this beautiful attunement to nature itself, which has so many cycles, so many ebbs and flows, so many things that have a resonance with what we really, really do know, what we really do experience. It's more honest, it's more open, and it's humbling, which is very interesting because I think there's a real misconception that astrology is fatalistic, number one, that you go to an astrologer to find out what your future is going to be, and that's final. And you shouldn't believe that because that's pseudoscience or it's superstitious and. But that's not actually what astrology is for. We look at weather patterns. We look at currents, just like a navigator on the ocean looks at currents. If you see a storm coming, you prepare for that storm, but you don't tell the captain whether or not he's going to die or how he's going to die. You don't tell the captain whether or not he should go out to sea. That's his choice, you know? You don't tell somebody how to respond to weather. You just tell them about the weather.
This is, it's similar. I guess what I'm hearing you say is that we're at a period of time where, similar to what Voltaire was protesting against, is we're breaking free. We're trying to break out, right?
Exactly.
And when people are saying like, oh, astrology is predicting the future. So two groups of people who believe that astrology predicts the future and then there's nothing you can do about it. And then there's probably another group of people who says that's impossible, right? Like we can't predict. So, but the point is like, there's the in-between is like, we become part of the equation where we become part of the experience, where science wants us to believe that we have no power over it and a power over our experience. The point is, if you can, you can actually be part of the experience of your future, but it doesn't mean that it's determined, right?
That's right.
And probably that's what people feel challenged by astrology because they're so stuck in the paradigm of like X equals, A A plus B equals C. It's like, it's not always like that. There's the unknown factor in everything. The unknown is going to have a factor. So I love that. I love that. You said that the humbling part. Yeah.
It's very humbling, and that's when I said magic, we have power to create our reality. We do. But within the context of the cycles of nature, within the context of nature, and that's how it should be. And we do live in a very hubristic time where we're always trying to get to the edge of what nature will allow and push, and there's always tremendously terrible consequences. That's what Frankenstein was about. That's what all science fiction is about, is like the devastating consequences when you try to go against the grain of nature, when you go against the generosity and the kindness and the benevolence of nature, and you try to overpower it. There are always tremendous consequences for that. And there are for our spiritual path as well. So it's not to say that you don't have a tremendous amount of creative control over your life, but you need to be real about, what's in harmony with nature. And that's what astrology is all about, is what's in harmony with nature. For example, everybody predicts the future at some level. It's really commonplace in materialist paradigms, like economists are always predicting the future, political theorists are always predicting the future. There are tons of different people in the world that predict the future, sometimes really poorly. Astrologers do the same thing, sometimes very poorly. It really depends on the quality of the intelligence, the lens of perception that somebody is using. An astrologer has biases like anyone else, and will project their biases onto the weather patterns that they're seeing. And that may lead them to interpret things very badly. And, they're just human. So you should never listen to an astrologer's predictions as being gospel truth, because you should never listen to anybody's predictions as being gospel truth. There are human errors, misinterpretations, and there are also unsettling, shocking, and surprising events that take the direction of civilization or a society in a direction that was actually unpredictable. And there are elements in astrology that acknowledge the unpredictability, the chaos. There is a planet named Uranus that represents chaos, unpredictability, shocks, and disruptions. All you can see is that, oh, wow, a lightning bolt's going to strike, but we don't know where. Just like a meteorologist knows, okay, a lightning storm's coming, but what is going to burn down? We don't know. We don't know. And you just have to humble yourself and admit that you don't know. But we all predict the future. For example, the astrology starts with really simple cycles, the sun and the moon. So simple. The zodiac is a seasonal calendar that describes the sun's journey. Now, scientists get really mad because they're like, the sun doesn't move, the earth does. I'm like, astrologers know that, and they always did, even in ancient Babylon. What the point is to acknowledge what our experience is here on earth. So our experience here on earth is that the sun rises and it sets. You can't laugh at somebody for saying, look at the sun rising. You can't laugh at them and say, that's not true. The sun's not rising. Yes, it is. The sun is rising to us from our perspective here. That's what that's our experience of it. And what does the experience provide internally? It gives us a sense of freshness, a new day, a new dawn. Our consciousness changes in relationship to what appears to be the sun rising. And we take it from there. What appears to be the sun rising and then setting, what appears to be the moon growing and shrinking, also gets related to all of the other planets, how we perceive them from Earth. It's the you are here. It's the point of perspective that we're taking. That doesn't mean that astrologers now or 1,000 years ago couldn't conceive of other points of perspective in space. Of course they could. And they absolutely did. And yet it was still important for them to acknowledge what our experience is like from here. So day and night, that's the first cycle. Another cycle that's really easy is the seasons, so every zodiacal season is a part of, there's 3 zodiacal seasons for every season on Earth. So we're in spring right now where I am. We're in the first season of spring, Aries. And that means that back in winter, even if I wasn't an astrologer, back in winter, I was making some predictions for myself that when the spring came, I was probably gonna get more into detoxing. I was probably going to want more juice. I was probably going to get more energetic. And I made that prediction based on what? Based on my knowledge that a warmer, brighter season is coming where everything's going to come back into full bloom. Therefore, I too am going to come back into bloom. There's going to be energy for me to access. Mm-hmm. There's going to be more excitement for me to tap into. That's just how it is. And so I could have predicted accurately 3 months ago that by early April, I'm going to be feeling more alive and awake and energized. And that turned out to be true. But that was a prediction. And I don't see how that's not scientific because it's a predictable cycle. There is a rhythm to it that we can rely on. And we can observe how this rhythm is forever supporting us. Now, some people get sick in spring. That's okay too. Some people get lethargic in spring because they didn't take care of themselves in winter. There's always other factors to take into account, but you could easily still make that prediction that you'll probably start feeling better in spring. That's all that astrology is, but it gets more nuanced and a little more fine-tuned. There are more layers to it. The complexity is most definitely more than that, but nevertheless, it doesn't actually really veer off that simple path, which is, let's just acknowledge that the more light and heat and life there is around you, the more energy there is for you to tap into. You make a choice how you want to relate to the spring. You make a choice how you want to look at the effect that the shifting light and the shifting energies will have on you. You don't have to enjoy spring. You don't have to. You could act exactly the same way as you did in winter if you want. But why? We are always moving and shifting and changing. That's how nature is. We too are nature. We are always being kind of moved to evolve. And so we evolve with the seasons, and it is a healthy way to live. That could be quantified and proven that if you align yourself with just the seasons alone, solar seasons, then you're on the right track because you're eating the right foods. You're taking care of your body in the way that your body is resonating with, because your body is a part of the earth. Your body feels the light. Your body feels the life. So that's all that astrology is. It seems so weird and superstitious and esoteric, but it's not. And fatalism is a linear concept. Fate is like a line. You're stuck on a line. You're either going up or down, or you're going forward or backwards, and you're stuck on a track, right? That's the whole idea of fate. You're stuck on a track and you can't get off. Fatalism is something that is profoundly felt in an IQ test. IQ, it puts you on a point. It plots you on a point on a scale, and it tells you how much value you have in society based on what? Albert Einstein, who is rumored to have had an IQ of 150, so he's become like the gold standard of having a high IQ. He never took an IQ test. That's a lie. He thought IQ tests were stupid because he thought it was senseless and meaningless to try to measure human intelligence and plot it on a scale. He legitimately thought that was superstitious and pseudoscientific to actually attempt to measure human intelligence, because what are you measuring? Somebody's ability to recognize patterns in a certain amount of time? And is that the only kind of intelligence? And how can you value that? Really, truly, what the hell does that mean? And we also see fatalistic ideas in your socioeconomic class, the one you were born into. Well, that means you're on this track. And yeah, you can break out of it, but it's hard. And even in America, where I live, where you're supposed to be able to have so much ability to move, believe me, they make it hard. They make it hard to break out of your socioeconomic class. That's your fate. That's how they want it to be. That's how society runs. There's a lot of fatalism in our world, a lot. Whether you graduate from high school or college, blah, blah, blah. There's so many things that we use to measure our success and our value. Your weight, your BMI, that's a good one. All of these things.
It's so funny here in Korea, because it's BMI based on Korean culture here. So every time every time I go to the doctor or whatever to take a BM, I'm way off the scales, like way off.
Right.
So it's contextual. It's contextual. Like
Exactly.
that linear line is contextual to where you are. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's extremely fatalistic because it's linear. And linear
Mhm.
time is fatalistic as well. Now, linear time is not bad in terms of we need it to, I met you at the proper time today because of linear time. We need
Yes.
it. Trains, planes, automobiles, making appointments. There's nothing wrong with having the conception of linear time. But again, the conception of linear time is pretty recent. It's like clock time's like what, like 500 years old for the masses. It's not, it was a new technology. It didn't reach the average person until about 500 years ago. And then even then, there's still places all over the earth where they don't have clock time, you know, they don't have the burden of clock time, linear time. Linear time is a dimension of consciousness that was born from human imagination once again. But astrology is not linear time, it's cyclical time.
Yes.
And what's so amazing about that is that it actually opens up all of this potential. Rather than showing you what track you're on, it shows you the cycle that you're in.
What I love.
Is,
oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
What I love about the concept or the sense of cyclical time is that you're still building the proof or whatever. Like if you wanted to look at it from a scientific perspective, you know, there's still a prediction. You're still, as you said earlier, you can still see that something might happen. And often that does happen if chaos doesn't like come into it. For example, as you said, in the spring, I know I'm 44 years old now. I can, after having lived 44 years, I can say that in the spring, I'm going to feel a lot more likely to go out and do things, you know, like go to the beach. Like, I mean, I can predict that.
Exactly.
And that, so this also points to the concept of magic too, because I can start testing all these little things that happen in my life. If I do this action, I take this action at this time, you know, based on the moon, for example, if I do a moon ritual or something like that, I can predict that the outcome might happen because I have proof that every other time that I've done it, I have had a result, maybe not the specific result. For example, if I did a moon ritual and I was calling in, I don't know, more a better relationship, or if I did something around Venus and I wanted to increase my beauty in my life, you know, maybe I wanted it to be specific, like I want beauty in this way, I want to lose weight, I want to look good, but maybe beauty came into my life in a different way, like somebody gifted me a piece of art. The proof is still there. The proof is still there. It's just not as black and white or whatever we want to call it. The fatalism, the linear time makes us believe that it has to be a very specific thing, when in fact it's much more creative than that. Yeah.
Exactly. Creative is exactly the word. And it's multivaried. It has a lot of ebb and flow, a lot of flexibility.
Yeah.
And we need that. We need both. We need cyclical time and we need linear time. That is dynamic tension. We need clear cause and effect, and we need openness to experience that's inexplicable. We need both. That's what we are. We are both.
Yeah.
And we just need to find balance between both. And then we find a lot more grace and a lot more rhythm and a lot more, I guess, peace in life, you know, allowing for mystery, allowing for unknown, as well as having enough familiarity and predictability to have some sense of reliability, like the solar seasons. It's extremely reliable. We are very sure that the sun will rise tomorrow, and that is a big part of what makes us feel solid inside. You know, there's always a new day. The new moon is another thing that we can ground into, and it is both a physical phenomenon that we can observe here on Earth, meaning that the light changes, it goes from dark to full. That's extremely scientific in its consistency and its rhythm. But also just the way that you described earlier, how you go within when the moon is dark.
Mm.
Think about what that means. I mean, the symbolism is also descriptive of a very real internal phenomenon, which is that when it's very, very dark at night, you yourself are withdrawn into the darkness of the inner world. And that's okay, because that's how seeds are planted. Seeds go down into the dark earth, and then they come back out into the light when they are germinated and ready to grow. Yeah. Your energy works the same exact way because you are nature.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful when you start juxtaposing the human experience to experiences of nature, just like the seed, as you described it. I love the seed symbolism. It's just, a seed it's not gonna grow if it's just right out there in the sun all the time. Like, it's not. It's like this. We can't, as a human, we can't be on all the time. Like, we can't. And there's this misconception that we can. And once you start admitting that, no, that's just like, stop trying to hack nature. You are part of nature. Once you start accepting that on a mental level, then, life is just easier, just easier. Yeah.
So much easier. And there's still so much for us. Like, we are so creative. Human beings are so amazing. We are here to shape nature. We are here to work with it. We are here to refine it, shape it, work with it, build with it. We are here to do that. But within certain bounds, and that is where spirituality comes in. That's why people have their spiritual path, their religions, because those spiritual teachings and their religions give them those bounds. And it's not foolish or insignificant. It's deep, natural, ecological wisdom expressing itself through these soul languages, which we call religion or spirituality, whatever it is. I don't think religion's a dirty word. I actually love religion. I studied it intensely in college. I love religion, but a lot of people are turned off by the word religion. I'm turned off by dogmatism.
Yeah, I think that's a really important differentiation. Because it's a good point, because I know some of the people listening here have had, horrible experiences with dogmatism, and just the rules and the expectations, and that's what's harmful. That's what's harmful.
Yeah, no matter what it is, political dogmatism, scientific dogmatism, religious dogmatism, whatever. I mean,
your home,
Exactly. Yeah. An example that I've always used from my personal life is, so I became a vegetarian when I was 4. I was a strange only child, so I just did these kinds of things. So I became a vegetarian, and I still am today. So it's something I started back then. And it made me an outcast when I was a child. But then when I became a teenager, and I'm in high school, all of these people at my high school became vegans, and it was like the coolest thing. So all the coolest kids were vegetarians, vegans. And I was like, wow, for the first time, I'm cool. And so I was like super jazzed about it. I was really excited. But then I find out that the attitude that is ruling this current, ruling the trend, is this extremely antagonistic, extremely aggressive, extremely dogmatic thing, which is full of hatred, honestly, for others, shaming people, attacking people, doing all these things that I was like, I don't want to be a part of this. This was never where I was coming from. And it taught me a lot. It was like this great object lesson of like, well, I am a vegetarian. I still am. I never faltered from that. It means a lot to me. That's how I choose to live. That's how I choose to eat. That's what I think is real and wise and good for me. But to use something that I believe in, that means a lot to me, to hurt other people, shame other people, frighten other people, attack other people, it never sat right with me. It didn't feel good. And I realized that's what dogmatism is. Right. And it's much better to just be who you are. If you want to inspire people to live as you live or believe as you believe, then be cool, like just be cool. And maybe someday they will ask you some questions. I've had people come to me and ask me about vegetarianism, and I give them the best advice that I know how to give them. But they come to me and I'm not grading them. My own husband's not a vegetarian. It's like, I don't expect to have other people conforming to my way of doing things, even though I believe in it for real. And I think it's important and it means a lot to me. It's still not okay to shame and attack and antagonize others with what you believe or what you do, even if you think it's important. So that's like an object lesson for us all about the things that we're into. And it's the same with astrology. Astrology could become dogmatic as well. It certainly was in the Middle Ages. It certainly was. And it could be again. But really, just being fair, being objective, the real cultural trend is the other side of dogmatism against astrology. That really is more massive than
right now. Yeah.
Right now, just to be real about what's going on historically, like, there's a real insecurity that I feel in people, especially from the scientific community. I get religious people sometimes who write me with a tirade. And I take that kind of seriously because I was raised Christian. I was raised Christian. I went to a Christian school until 7th grade. My mom is still, both my parents are Christian, actually. I come from a Christian family. That's straight up the truth. And like, I was raised with that idea of things. And yet I ended up doing this anyway. And it wasn't without thought. My interest in astrology it started for like normal reasons. Like I wanted to know my sun sign. I wanted to know my friend's sun signs. I wanted to know the sun sign of the boy I liked, that kind of thing as a teenager. Like it wasn't anything, I wasn't like a wunderkind when I was a teenager. It was just basic horoscope stuff. I just wanted to know like everyone else. And when I looked at natal charts, I was like, oh my God, that's complicated. I don't want to look at that. That's too much. I actually looked at it like, that's too much. But later on, when I started studying religion and anthropology and things like that, that's when astrology really caught me, because I started to understand at first an unconscious way, but eventually a very conscious way, that this language of symbols is sort of in all religions. All religions have astrological meaning. All religions are astrological. Christianity, the most famous example is the fact that the Magi looked at a star and knew that the Christ child was going to be born, and they traveled from the east to come greet him. That's in the Bible. They were astrologers. There's that. There's all kinds of passages in the Bible that talk about how the heavens declare the glory of God. There are all kinds of measurements of the quality of time and the right timing, the divine timing for things being written in the heavens. There's also condemnation of astrology in the Bible, but I'm condemning astrology too in certain contexts. I get it. You cannot say that something is absolutely true or absolutely holy, because it's used by people and people are inconsistent. But the Bible is full of astrology, and it's more than just the Magi. There's so much symbolism that's underneath the surface. And one example is simply like Jesus Christ has 12 disciples. Jesus Christ represents the sun, and the 12 disciples represent the 12 signs of the zodiac. There's that. And that doesn't mean, I'm not saying that Jesus didn't exist. See, people get really upset when you point out symbolism, because they think you're discrediting what the text says. I'm not. I'm actually just saying there's correlation. And the way that astrology works is that the symbolism of the heavens appears on Earth. Yes, it does. So the constant repetition of these themes and these symbols and this resonance is there. There's also the idea that, that Jesus Christ was like the symbol of the Piscean age, which we're actually transitioning out of right now. And when Jesus Christ was born, they said he was born in Bethlehem. That's where the star was, over the town of Bethlehem. Bethlehem means house of bread in Hebrew. House of bread, that refers to the constellation of Virgo, the maiden standing in the field of wheat. born of a virgin in the house of bread. You see what I mean? It's just like an endless fractal wave of esoteric symbolism, and it's all in the astrological language. The astrological language was used to speak the language of God in the Bible. Absolutely. Astrology is divination, which is again not a dirty word because it means knowledge of the divine. It means like, how can we divine what the supreme source of creation, the one, the all, is doing? And that's why it's so useful to look at the cycles of nature, because the cycles of nature were set in motion by what? From a religious perspective, the cycles of nature, the moon and the stars, the heavens declare the glory of God. That means that it all came from that single source. And so when you honor the cycles of nature, you are also eventually honoring that source of all creation. And therefore it's not atheistic, nor is it evil. Astrology can be used for evil, like anything, of course. If you're using it to tell somebody that they can't be something or can't do something, that's evil. If you're using it to scare somebody, to get a hook in them and control them, that's evil. If you're using it to tell somebody that they're fated to something, that's pretty evil. Otherwise, no, not at all. It's as evil as poetry. You know, there's evil poets, I'm sure. That doesn't make poetry evil.
It's like with everything. Like, I mean, in the energy work that I do, it's super important, and I'm just grateful to my teachers. And this is why we have teachers. We learn from people the power of intention, the power of intention, positive intention. Yes. You know, you do everything, and I know this word can feel maybe confusing to some people, but the basic thing is a simple prayer of, may the information that comes through be for the highest good and that harm comes to no one. Very basic, right? Yeah. You do that, you start that, your day like that, you start whatever magic you want to do with that, and you're good to go. You create a pure heart.
Exactly. 100%. Exactly. And it's just fascinating to me when the deeper you go into astrology, the more threads you'll find. And it's so woven into all the ancient texts, all the sacred scriptures. And that's not a lessening of their value. To me, that actually increases their value. So I'm not trying to disprove anybody's sacred texts. I'm actually saying there's something so powerful that these cycles of nature, these patterns of the divine, repeat, and they're found everywhere. And anything that's actually real has that in it. The Bible is real because it's full of these divine patterns of creation, full of them. And it's just one of the elements of those scriptures that will carry you to have revelation, to have real communion with the divine. And that is powerful, and that is important. And that is what prevents a human being that has free will and all of this creative power from being exclusively destructive. We have a lot of power to be creative and destructive. So we need inspiration and knowledge to guide us to be creative and have good intentions instead of being unconscious and destructive, because when we're unconscious and destructive, we create a lot of strife. We go to war, we steal, we rob, we rape, we pillage. It's horrible, and we really need help. We're in a very difficult position here on earth with so much power. And that is what we're learning to grapple with, is just how much power we actually have. And that is why we need philosophy and religion to give us the scope for our imagination, not just inspire the imagination to do whatever, instead guide the imagination to do something that's in harmony with nature. So in harmony with nature is not murder, war, rape, and killing.
No, not really. No.
There's aggression.
Wow. Yeah.
There's aggression. There's some violence.
Tension.
There's tension for sure. But like the things that human beings are capable of doing, that's really what separates us or makes us feel so separate. And that's when we are disharmonious and discord, So
Yeah.
Yeah, astrology is about being in harmony, and that's all. And it's not a religion, but it is a sort of language of soul that can help you understand religion more. It's not a science in the way that we think of science today, but it is a method of knowing things, of seeing the world. And it's definitely a consistent language and framework that goes back many thousands of years. So in that regard, it is. And it's most definitely an art form. I feel like in this era, the people that are really meant to vibe with astrology, use astrology, are artists and healers of all kinds. Because artists and healers are the ones that are always digging in deep to the inner world, and then offering what's inside of them to others. And they do that consistently, and they do that kind of selflessly. They do it even though it hurts. They do it because that's their calling in this life, to create things that inspire and uplift and offer their energy and their service to people, to bring them comfort, to bring them stability, to do what they can to make life a little better through beauty and through love. So artists and healers are the ones I feel are most deserving of the things that astrology can inspire. It's very enriching for that life.
Yeah, it's definitely given me so much more clarity on how I guide my clients, how I do my work, when I do my work. Like it's a game changer. I know that we have to end soon, and I feel like we've answered this question, but the main question of this podcast is how do we live a soul expressed life? And the question that I would ask is, how does astrology help us, or astrology and magic help us live a soul expressed life? I feel like we've answered that question. To me, I mean, I'll answer it quickly, and I'll ask you if you can also succinctly say something on that. I feel part of the, to live a soul expressed life is to, to express what your soul is, what your true self is, your higher self, whatever you want to call it, that essence of you, only you. And part of that happens when we are in harmony with with nature. I think that's what the Bible was getting at when you were talking about, when, that connection to divinity. That's when our soul can express itself, when we are in connection to the divinity. And that's only going to happen when you are in harmony with the cycles of nature. But I would love to hear what you think too.
Well, we haven't even talked about the most basic reason for using astrology, which is to just study your natal chart. Your natal chart is the snapshot of where everything was when you were born. And again, to many people, this is extremely esoteric and weird. And how could that have anything to do with who you are? Well, it has a lot to do with who you are, because of the quality of the energy when you were born. The quality of fruit is dependent on what season it is. The quality of a plant is dependent on what season it's in. And there is, whether you want to believe it or not, some correlation to the internal structure, the psyche, the soul of the person, depending on what was going on in the heavens at the time of their birth. And what it basically shows is all of the gifts that you were born to share. And it's a whole picture of you. It's not you chopped up into little bits where we go, we like this part of you, we don't like that part. There's nothing linear about it. It's a circle. It's the wholeness of you. And what it reveals, it's this beautiful organic image that shows that every part of you has a purpose. So not only do you have a purpose, which is a really terrible existential crisis that I think a lot of modern people have.
Yes.
Does life have a meaning? What is my life purpose? Your natal chart says absolutely. And this is why we believe that it connects to the divine, because it just lays it out. Yes, you have a purpose, a divine purpose, and you were born with all of these gifts to share. And every part of you has a purpose, even the things that you yourself, in all your humanness, might misjudge as being a flaw or a weakness. It's not really seen that way in the natal chart. You might struggle with certain things, but the way that you live a soulful life is by actually respecting how much growth is actually happening as a result of you having a challenge. Because not only is your natal chart an image of what was going on when you were born, it shows the potential, the full potential of how all of this can flower. So it's very much in motion, and it's not just a static two-dimensional image of who you are. It's instead this map of your soul, and it shows where your soul will flourish with grace and ease, and where your soul grows and develops from the push, from the struggle, from the restraint. And we do need both. Once again, like, we need that dynamic tension between the ease and the flow and the endless potential, as well as the strain and the struggle and the resistance. And so when you see your natal chart as that perfect circle, as that wholeness of being, it's so inspiring. And it, for me, was the very first time I read my own natal chart for the first time. Like, I knew I was a Virgo until I was about 22. And then when I actually like decided I want to learn how to read my natal chart, I want to learn all of it. For the first time in my life, I saw something that was a reflection of who I was, that I didn't hate or have a problem with or have a judgment on. Because prior to that, I had my IQ tested. I'd had a personality test assessment. Right. I'd been assessed here, assessed there. I'd had report cards, this, that, the other thing. And I was always like, I don't measure up. Where do I fall on the scale of things? So neurotic, so self-negating, so self-effacing, so anxious about everything that was supposed to be a reflection of me. And I was always like trying to edit myself. Like, I like this part of me, but I hate that part of me. And, you know, just so many problems, mental problems. I just had a lot. And it all came from thinking that I had to be chopped up into bits and like edited. That was legitimately where I was coming from psychologically. I'm like, I need to be edited. I'm not good the way I am. Some things have to be deleted, trimmed, cut. Then I see my natal chart, and it's like, it's the whole picture, everything. And it all connects. And suddenly, like, my consciousness just changed overnight. I'm like, wow. I'm not saying I never struggled with neurosis again. I'm not saying I never felt anxious again. I'm not saying that I've never felt bad about myself since then. I certainly have. But it is a completely different thing, because I also know that that's a temporary passing misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. And that underneath all of that, there's this whole picture. Everything connects. Everything has a purpose. And yeah, it gives you this sense of suddenly relaxation and trust. And also, you're awestruck by yourself without being egotistical. It's not ego stuff. It's not arrogance. You don't look at your natal chart and get all puffed up about being more important than other people. It's not that. Instead, the circle, the whole picture, the integrated consciousness that it represents, the real picture of what your soul is just stunning. Yeah. Like the way that a leaf or a seashell is stunning. You're like, wow, that's me. I'm the leaf or the seashell. So beautiful. And they're all different. And that actually gives you genuine tolerance for other people. Mm-hmm. Not sociological tolerance, which is extremely artificial and usually fake. I mean, like, you actually just know how many types of people there are out there, and you have a lot more patience.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's it. After halfway through your course, I kept thinking, oh, this is why this person is this way. And I just had like so much more compassion for them, for myself, right. You know, so understanding, compassion. And then when when you helped me realize that it's a soul map, like, oh my God, like I've been looking for this forever. Who hasn't?
I know.
Like,
exactly.
You know?
It's stunning. It's an incredible thing to see. And it's way beyond ego. I am not saying that you become a narcissist. No. It's very humbling actually, but it's also because it's not just about you. You realize everyone has one of these. Everyone has one of these. And wow, everybody has a purpose. And wow, you actually start to really know that instead of just paying lip service to that. And, the idea of being more compassionate towards others for being different. I mean, that is real with astrology.
Yeah.
It's this knowledge of how many different types of people there really are. And, in psychology, we're trying to get at this. We're trying to get to the inner world. We're trying to understand ourselves. We're trying to appreciate what we have to offer. But the problem with psychology, and I have respect for psychology too. I actually do. And I really love like Freud and Jung, especially, but William James, Freud, and Jung are really top guys in my oeuvre of favorite authors. But they're always looking for something that's wrong with you. That's the premise of psychology. You go to the doctor because you're sick. You go to the psychologist because you're ill. You need to be put back together. You're broken. There's something wrong with you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to the doctor if you're ill. You should. But why can't we explore the inner world with that level of intensity, looking for what's right with us? And again, like a lot of my mental illness was adjusted naturally over time by actually learning to see myself this way. Instead of trying to figure out where I measured up in the scheme of things, trying to find out what's wrong with me. Why can't I fit in? Or why can't I be the best? Or why can't I measure up? Instead of being just tormented by those ideas, which turns into neurosis, which is mental illness, I started to see things differently in this holistic way, which is so important. It's so healthy. So you're looking for what's right with you instead of what's wrong. Think about just the intention, like you said. It's all about your intention. In science, it's all about your method. It's all about your question. What question are you asking? That's the quality of the result you're going to get. That's the quality of the experiment and the result you're going to get. So psychology is great, but it's about what's wrong with you. Astrology is great because it's about what's right with you. And if you need to know what's wrong with you too, you could find that as well. It's definitely included, but it's really more about how that thing that's wrong with you is also what's right with you. Because without that thing that's wrong with you, you wouldn't have grown in the following ways and you wouldn't be the person you are today. It's actually extremely wise in that regard. So
yeah. Wow. So good, Rachel. Oh my gosh. I mean, go on and on to talk about this. There's so much. I'm really holding back my questions because I'm like, okay, gotta edit this too. not edit. Sorry. That's not what I mean. I mean, like there's a time limit to my podcast. Ooh, okay. I'm holding back, but, what I do want to say is thank you so much. And for everyone listening, I highly recommend getting on Rachel's Patreon, getting into Rachel's Patreon. I don't know how to say it, but she sends a weekly astrology forecast that helps you understand what's going on in the cosmos right now, for the week. And I listen to that and I get, again, always like, oh, okay, now I understand. So many revelations and just, again, compassion for myself. And I'm able to share that with my clients. And they're so, they feel grateful, and so I highly recommend that. And Rachel, where else? And of course, her discovery course, if you want to dive in and learn this for yourself and gain the confidence to know your natal chart yourself, to be able to communicate about the stars and the planets and everything yourself, I highly recommend it. But Rachel, where else can people get in touch with you?
Well, my website is aeolianheart.com, AEOLIANHEART, Aeolian Heart. And you can get on my newsletter on my website. So go to my website, get on my newsletter, and I will send you seasonal forecasts, which I put a lot of work into.
Yes.
I always relate the zodiacal seasons to a great artist or an author from history so that I can make the energy come alive and also be educational and inspiring. So it's more than just an astrology article. Yeah. And I have a Facebook page. You can find me at Aeolian Heart Astrology on Facebook. And I have a Patreon, as Josette said, and I also have a YouTube channel that I just started. So if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, Aeolian Heart Astrology, you'll be one of the first to start following me. I'm going to do some really cool stuff on there very soon. I've started putting out live streams and a few videos, seasonal forecasts. And I'm going to be doing some videos on the issues in astrology that we've talked about today. Astrology versus religion, astrology versus science, with a lot of respect and love for all sides. So I'm not going to be causing a war, but I am really interested in talking about these things. So yeah, that's where you can find me, my website, YouTube, Facebook, and the best way to be in touch with me is to get on my newsletter list. So sign up for that.
Yeah. Yes. And Aeolian Heart, Rachel is so generous with her information. If you want to geek out on all levels, like it's history, art, everything. I mean, it's just so much fun to read your newsletter and everything that comes through. So thank you so much for your generosity of heart, for being here. And yeah, I hope to have you on the podcast again. We'll continue.
For sure. That would be super fun. Let's do it.
Right on. Okay. Thank you, Rachel.
Bye.